everyone. I am Nikki. As I said, I'm calling in from Westchester, New York. I am head of community at Hatch, which is a maternity brand. And I am also founder of the Newborn Agency, which is a marketing agency that markets to moms. I am so excited to be here. Thanks to Auggie. I think most people here should know what Auggie is, but they are a platform that supports expecting parents with tools and educational events like this, and connection and community, which is so important. I am mom to Ryder, who is 4.5 years old, boy, crazy boy, and Georgia, 15 months old. And I'm really excited to have this conversation on intro to solids and allergens, which I think is a big part of that. And I'm really thrilled to have our panelists join us, who are a wealth of knowledge, way more than myself. I mean, I can obviously jump in on what worked for me, and as a mom that's gone through it, as a one-sided perspective on that, but I'm excited to kind of hear from the experts on how we can do this as easily as possible with as little stress as possible, and just feel supported. I want to everybody will go around, introduce themselves, and then I will kind of give rules and tips for the conversation. I say conversation because it is dynamic in conversation. I want everyone to be able to ask questions. Obviously, we won't be able to answer specific questions about specific things because we have a lot of people on this call, which is wonderful, but we'll try and kind of vet through any questions and clarifications that we have as we go through the conversation. So with that said, Dr. Fischman, do you want to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Tiffany Fischman. I'm a board certified pediatrician. I've been in practice for about 12 years. And I would say even in that span of time, a lot has changed with what we're telling parents, which is pretty incredible because it doesn't feel like it's actually been that long. I do have 4 kids of my own. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Skipped one. I usually always forget one. And, so I've kind of fed them all in different ways and learned a lot going through that process. And I have to admit that I learned about solid starts from one of my patients, and they actually sent me the allergen guide. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is great.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, solid starts is incredible. And I wish I had my 4th like in 2020, which is I think when Solid Starts was born. And so I kind of missed out on that, but I'm so happy to have it as a tool to share with my patients and make it easier. Like it makes my job easier to be able to say, hey, look at this. This is how you should cut it, because I can't sit there when you feed your kid for the first time. So anyway, I'm so excited to be here. And I forgot to mention, I am a pediatrician at Sollis Health, which is a concierge. Traditionally it is an emergency room, but they are launching pediatrics in Los Angeles. So I am leading that charge.
Yeah, and there's locations all over New York, California.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Dr. Bajowala, you want to go?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Sakina Bajowala, and I'm a board certified pediatrician and allergist and immunologist. I've been in practice for almost 20 years now. I'm the medical director of Caneland Allergy and Asthma Center here in Illinois, and I'm the in-house allergist and immunologist at Solid Starts. I'm the mother of 2 boys, 20 and 16. So I'm a little bit out of the game when it comes to starting solids, but I have a lot of reminders and practice on how to do that with all my young patients every day.
Amazing. And other, different moment in time, teenagers. Kary.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kary Rappaport. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and I have been doing this work for over 20 years. I have specialized pretty much the entirety of that time in feeding infants and young children, specifically with starting solids. I'm also a board certified lactation consultant, so I do a lot of work with breast and bottle feeding as well. I've worked across the entire spectrum in home with families of typically developing kids. I've worked for 10 years in the NICU and cardiothoracic ICU at Children's Hospital Los Angeles with infants and children who have severe medical complexity, helping them learn to eat. So I've been doing this for a very long time, and I am one of the infant feeding and swallowing specialists who helped to create Solid Starts and who has built that platform for parents. So it's wonderful to hear that you use it and that you recommend it. It means a lot to us when our medical professionals recommend us.
Amazing. Oh,
I also
wonderful.
have kids. Mine are also a little older. Sorry, they're
Oh,
12
very worse.
and 9.
Okay, we're all in different phases. Can learn a
Yeah.
lot from you guys.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about solids now. And just like I said, please use the chat function. I will try my best to kind of manage through that. Obviously, if we get a lot of questions that we can follow up with after, we will. But to get us started, Dr. Fischman, so like intro to solids, I feel like starting solids is one of those things that is like the thing that you think about for the first 6 months. Obviously, mom postpartum, and then you're like, okay, I need to do this. When do I do it? How do I do it? How do I think about it? Can you just give us kind of an overview of like your recommendation and like what you see, what you help your patients with, and then we'll also hand it over to Kary and Dr. Bajowala on
Sure.
kind of their
So just like
perspective,
with
just
everything
generally
in
speaking.
pediatrics with developmental milestones, et cetera, there's a range, right? So usually like the earliest sign of solid readiness is probably around 4 months where they're starting to have good head control. But the other things that we look for aren't usually always there yet at 4 months yet. So beyond the head control, it's going to be sitting with not full support, like unsupported, but like with some support. So sitting like with in a high chair with some back support, or sitting like on a parent's lap, kind of propped up. And being able to do that is really important. The other thing, and this is like kind of the fun thing, is your kid interested in food? Are they like looking for it? Are they like watching you when you're eating? And then are they starting to grab for things? Do they want to actually take the food off of your plate and put it in their mouths? And are they able to physically do that? So those are kind of the major things that I look for in terms of readiness. And then it's usually a conversation with the family, because as you can imagine, there's so many different like cultures, so many different influences, going into like when you should start. And so I have 4-month-olds that have come in like they're already feeding their kid and they didn't even ask me, right? So I think that there's a huge range, and so I try to like meet the family where they are and then developmentally go through like with their child, like what would be some reasons to maybe wait versus start.
Yeah, I have to say with my second, I was like waited to the last fall.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I don't want the mess anymore.
I mean, I just didn't, I knew she was gonna eat. I did it because she had a hard time with milk and formula, so I was like, ooh, let's do food. But yeah, I think it's one of those things, the range makes it a little bit hard because you're like, if you don't do it at the top of the range, then you're like, am I late? And you're forever thinking you're late until you get to the moment where you introduce it.
There's not a big rush, right? I mean, Dr. Bajwal will touch on the allergen introduction and the urgency for that kind of a thing, but in general, there's not a rush, and every baby's a little bit different, and everybody's going to be ready at a slightly different time, and doing it at the exact right moment, that just doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist in parenthood in general. I think a lot of people are here early in there, and you will learn that everyone, like my son spoke so quickly, walked very late, my daughter walking, not saying a word. Like there's just like these milestones are great and everything, but yes.
Yeah, it's hard not to compare, but
it's hard not to compare. Yes, I'm living in that. Kary, what are your recommendations for like first foods? I see someone actually, jumped in and was like interested in ancestral diet, bone marrow, soft-boiled egg yolks, liver. Those sound really like nutrient dense and amazing.
Go for it.
Go for it. I think, but I guess where, I think where I have always started is like the soft. But yeah, what do you typically recommend outside of allergens in terms of first foods?
Yeah, we love this question, and partly we created Solid Starts to help people understand that there is a wide range of foods that you can feed your baby. It does not have to be a specific set of foods. Oftentimes you hear people suggest avocado or banana, softer foods that are easy to digest, that are not common allergens. Those are wonderful places to start, but you truly have a wide range of foods available to you. We have a guide that we created that has 50 fantastic first foods, but even in making that, there were like 200 first foods that we considered that were like, these are all good options too. We love people to use our app and our resources to find foods that they care about, foods that they love, foods that are seasonal and local and fresh and available to them, foods they're already cooking, foods that they love and eat as a family. We know from the research that the more a baby is introduced to flavors early and often, the more likely they are to accept those foods. And so the more likely they are to join you in the family meal as they get a little bit bigger. So there's really not a perfect first food, and we want to aim for variety. And I'll let Dr. Bajowala speak to allergens, because
I
we
do want to
do
get
want to
there.
bring those in really early, but we often recommend waiting on those for the first week or two so that we're not jumping directly into the common allergens. So you're kind of getting your sea legs over those first few days, the first week or two, with more easily digestible foods. But meats are a great first option. They're iron rich. We have lots of options for those in our app, as are veggies and fruits that are cooked or prepared in a way that can be safe for your baby.
Yeah. Dr. Bajwal, you want to get into allergens? Like what?
I'd like to just touch on the idea of how we introduce egg for the first time. I saw something mentioned about soft-boiled egg. And it's not that soft-boiled egg is not something that you can feed your baby. You absolutely can. But when you're introducing egg for the very first time, the studies demonstrate that babies are far more likely to tolerate that well if the egg is very well cooked. So something like a hard-boiled egg that can then be mashed up and fed, or a well-scrambled egg or an omelet strip might be a great way to introduce egg for the very first time. And then once it's established that it's well tolerated, we can certainly branch out and start doing other forms of less extensively cooked egg.
Yeah. Someone said, like, can I use the Biba? Yeah, of course. Like you could use, I used to take a hard-boiled egg and like with avocado and mix it together. And I mean, one thing I want to get into is purees versus baby-led weaning in the next topic. And because there's a lot of fat around baby-led weaning and making people feel less than if they don't do that because it's the better way. And influencer culture is very hard. And so, yeah, so answering Anna's question, the Biba is a great way to do that, especially with something like an egg, like a hard-boiled egg, which I feel like can be like a little bit dense, to kind of mix it up with something else. But Kary, do you want to touch on baby-led weaning versus, and then I want your take, Dr. Fischman and Dr. Rajwala, on this baby-led weaning versus purees. I was not a baby-led weaning gal. I was terrified of it. And I just pureed, and then eventually my daughter and my son both took to bigger pieces of food naturally. Like it really just happened, like 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. And I felt really good about it. So, but I do think there's a lot of pressure. I've gotten a lot of text messages from new moms being like, I see this. Is it the cooler thing, like the cooler thing to do? I'm like, we're talking about cooler things when it comes to feeding our children, but would love your kind of take on it. Everyone's take on it, but yeah, Kary.
I'm happy to start. Like I said, I've been doing this over 20 years. So as Dr. Fischman said, there's been a wide range of changes that have happened in how we feed babies over that time. And even before I get into that, I just want to say, because I've been doing this for a long time and I've worked with thousands of infants who have varying levels of eating difficulties, I will also say that infants are incredibly adaptable and resilient. So no matter which way you start, no matter how you do this, even if you get it kind of all wrong for a bit, you can always get back on track. Infants are really adept at learning new skills and figuring it out. So it's really low stakes, I think, as long as you're having a good time and you are
I do
following
feel good about it. That's a big
basic
part of it.
Exactly. It really
Part
is.
of it.
So if one way or the other is going to stress you out, don't choose that way. Use the tools that are available to you that make you feel good and use that strategy. I will say, again, having done this for a long time, I've seen the swell of information that pointed everyone towards the traditional method of spoon feeding and purees shift towards, oh, there's a new approach, baby-led weaning, that explode in popularity, and people get very excited about that. And it also came up against a lot of resistance from the medical community, especially, but also from some parents. And so then there was sort of this big push against that to say, no, this can be safe. This is great, which has then sort of created this other backlash of being like, you're not as good if you don't do it. Or it's, like you said, this extra special way and you can only do that. And the reality is, again, babies are flexible. There's lots of ways to do this. There are pureed foods that adults eat, so we want to include purees in addition to finger foods. The research is very clear that we want to try and move babies onto textured foods and finger foods by around 9 months old. There's some wiggle room in how you get there. And we also know that the research is clear that if you want to jump right into baby-led weaning, it's not an unsafe thing to do. If your baby is showing signs of readiness, they can absolutely start that way. But again, if it's going to stress you out and you want to go the path of giving purees and spoon feeding for a bit until you feel more confident and your baby's showing signs that they're more interested and eager to reach out to grab your food, absolutely go that way too. It's a perfectly fine way to bring your baby into the family meal.
Cool. Dr. Fischman, Dr. Bajowala,
I mean, I
anything?
don't know how if I can say it any better than Kary said it,
Yeah.
but you know, I think I encourage parents to just have fun with it as much as I know it can be fear provoking. Like, be playful with it, let your kid get messy. I would put my kids in their high chair with just their diaper on because I knew it was like going to be an instant bath. And I encourage them to feed what they're feeding themselves, right? Like, not necessarily making or preparing anything, just giving the baby, and maybe not the first food, right? But like, you know, and I would say I did some purees in the beginning with all of my kids, but then quickly graduated to just table food. I remember my oldest, who's 10 now, she went to a daycare, and I was a resident at the time, and I remember picking her up at lunchtime, and she just had a full plate of food in front of her, and I was like, wow, can she eat that? She's only 6 months. And it was like, well, I guess if they're doing it, they must know what they're doing. And you know, she was a great eater, you know, and just like would just put anything in her mouth. She had control. And I think kids do really well when they are given the control and the reins, and they're not necessarily being like shoved a spoon in their mouth. You know, and if you are doing purees, maybe like allow them to reach in and grab it from you and try to feed themselves. I think that's a good way to do it too.
Yeah.
So I think a combination of both is sort of typically what people end up doing, not necessarily baby-led weaning versus purees, you know, but again, it doesn't have to be so strict and, you know, like, oh, you need to be doing this by 7 months and 8 months is, you know, parents always are asking like, how much do I give my baby of this? And I'm like, I don't actually know, because your baby is the boss, right? Like, they guide it. It's almost the same thing when
Yes,
they're
they are.
breastfeeding, right? Like, I don't actually know how many ounces your baby like needs exactly, right? Your baby is smart enough to know when they're full, and you need to follow their cues.
Yeah,
Can
100%.
we do, yeah, go on, Dr. Bajowala.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think when we think about feeding, it's nourishment and community and joy and, you know, togetherness, and it's not a religion, right? Like, it doesn't need to be exactly by the book every time. There's so much beauty in variability and diversity. And like Kary was saying, diversity of textures, diversity of flavors, diversity of allergens, but also diversity of quantity, right? There's going to be some days that you don't eat a lot. And there's going to be some days that baby finishes and asks for more.
Same with
And there's
me. Yeah.
beauty in that too, in learning that tolerance for variability and quantity as well. And so I don't like to fixate on, well, it has to be this way at this time, and my baby's not eating enough of this particular allergen. Don't sweat it. It will all work its way out in the end.
Yeah, I think this is a good, something that I had meant to do. Does someone want to take that? What is baby-led weaning? Because I think that's kind of like insider baseball to moms, and people might not know. Someone want to take it, Kary or Dr. Fischman?
Yeah, I can take that.
Go for it.
Baby-led weaning is just one method of starting solids with your baby. And the predominant ideas with baby-led weaning are that your baby can feed themselves. So you let them pick up the spoon, or you let them pick up the food and do that from the start. You don't have to actually feed them or put anything in their mouth. And baby-led weaning traditionally skips the baby food. It skips foods that are specifically pureed, and it skips the sort of progression of purees from stage one, you know, thin, watery, to slightly thicker over time, and then eventually to small pieces of food, and goes straight to finger foods, with the understanding that at around 6 months old, when your baby is ready to feed themselves, they're also ready with a bunch of oral motor reflexes and mechanisms to help build those chewing skills directly with those foods. You don't have to go to baby foods and then go to bigger pieces later if you don't want to.
Yeah, And I think like, as I said, I was just more comfortable with purees, but like a piece of avocado for me was fine because it was like a softer food that I felt comfortable with. So like it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Kids are not robots. They don't need to be prescribed one thing and that's it. They're huge. Like my husband would always be like, he didn't eat anything today. And I'm like, okay, there are some days where like I'm just not as hungry. Like that's just human being. Like I think we are so rightfully so worried that we're going to do something wrong. And I don't know if this is going to be an unpopular thing. You're going to do something like you could do everything right and something's going to be wrong. Like it's just going to happen. And so let's just like treat ourselves with kindness, have fun with it, and just be open to changing it up if it's not working and or if it's not feeling right for you. A lot of questions coming through. One I want to talk about is, I know we spoke about the foods that are good to start with. What are the foods you can't eat under 1 year? I know honey. What are the other things, Dr. Bajowala, that you should avoid for the first year of life?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we want to avoid honey for that first year, but there's really not very many foods that you cannot give a child in the first year of life. I think I saw something in the comments saying, well, you can't give milk. No, you can give milk. You should give milk. And we can give nuts. I think it's more about the way you give the food, right? So when we worry about things like choking, and I'm sure that Kary will address this, we can give peanut, but we're not going to give whole nuts, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to give foods that can be choking hazards and get stuck in small airways if they're aspirated. But there's ways to prepare almost any food in a way that it can be safe for a child. Note that we do have some precautions about undercooked seafood, like raw seafood, things like that. And, this is not to say that it cannot be done, but you just have to take the appropriate precautions and keep in mind that, about things like foodborne illness. And so we want to be careful about things like that. But for the most part, there's very few things that cannot be offered.
Yeah. A lot of people want to know about water. When do you introduce water? We got like 3 pluses to that question. I don't remember. So Dr. Fischman, you want to take it?
I usually recommend it when they're starting solids, just giving it alongside a meal and seeing what they do with it. I mean, they're
I
still
forgot
getting
about
most of the
it.
water
Yeah.
from their formula or from breast milk, but being introduced to the idea of something other than milk. And I also don't like milk with the meal because I don't want them to fill up and be full and not eat because of that. That can definitely interfere with their interest in eating. So usually around the time that you're starting solids, so 4 to 6 months, but I would say 6 months is probably more the target. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not necessary because you'll get your hydration needs met through breast milk and formula, but it can be helpful on a hot day to supplement that. It's also just a really helpful way, like you said, to build cup drinking skills, which are one of those things that's going to take usually anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to establish the ability to drink from an open cup or a straw cup or a sippy cup. So putting water in there as opposed to milk, or like breast milk or formula, which you will be potentially wasting at first, is a nice pathway for that. And it's also nice to introduce water at meals just to help with moving the food around and moistening the mouth and with chewing.
Yeah. We have a lot of questions on allergen. So I know we can't get like to the nitty gritty of like everybody's specific, but thoughts on exposure therapy. If someone like does have Dr. Bajwala, like if somebody does get positive test, like positive allergy for eggs, someone said they got it positive for eggs, cashews, and pistachios. Like, what are your thoughts on like how to deal with that? Can that change over time? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this by saying that there's a big difference between having a positive allergy test for something and actually being allergic to that food. False positive tests are very common, which is why allergists tend not to do batteries of food allergy testing on children, even if they are considered to be at potentially higher risk of developing allergies, because false positive testing is so common. In order to be diagnosed with a true food allergy, you need to have a positive test, but also a history reactivity with that allergen ingestion or exposure. Now, once you have that diagnosis of food allergy, it's important to keep in mind that many food allergies that develop in infancy are spontaneously outgrown in early childhood. And this includes allergens like milk and egg and wheat and soy. Over 70% of these babies will outgrow the allergen on their own without any help from us. We just have to monitor them to see when it happens.
Yeah.
For
Can
those
you
food
take- yeah.
allergies,
No, go on.
for those food allergens that are more persistent, there is treatment available, and one of those treatments is food allergen desensitization therapy, also known as sublingual immunotherapy or oral immunotherapy. And this is a way of retraining the immune system to build up tolerance to foods that it's currently overreacting to. But because a child who's pursuing this therapy is already, by definition, allergic to that food, it entails some risk and cannot be pursued on your own in the home setting. These
Right.
types of therapies can only be done under the supervision of an allergist who is trained in the recognition and management of allergic reactions, and so they can guide you appropriately.
Amazing. And I should have asked this first, but like, can you just briefly take us through like how you do an allergen? Like how you, like, I know you said egg is a good one, but like, how do you do it? How many times do you expose it? How big, like, I know it's
Yes.
like different sizes over 3 days with only foods you've already eaten. So will you just take
Sure.
everyone through kind of that process that you recommend?
Sure. And so once again, I'll preface this by saying there's multiple ways to skin a cat, right?
Mhm.
You could decide that once you've introduced a handful of complementary foods and baby is getting the hang of solids and enjoying it, now it's time to start introducing our first food allergens. I love to start with egg if you're not vegan, right? Or avoiding eggs for cultural or religious purposes. And a hard-boiled egg is a great way to start. I like to mash it up. An alternative is a well-cooked omelet strip. Baby can just chomp on it, or well-cooked scrambled egg that's kind of mashed up. Just start with a small amount, small bite, even a quarter teaspoon is enough. And then hang out for 10 minutes. Make sure baby's good. If baby's doing great, you can either kind of go for it and give more that day and give a small serving at baby's regular feeding pace and see how they do, and then maintain it in the diet. However, if the idea of giving a full serving on day one feels a little daunting, you can do it over the course of a day. Maybe give a little bit in the morning, a little more in the afternoon. If even that feels daunting to you, you can introduce a common food allergen over the course of a few days. Maybe day one, you do a quarter teaspoon, day two, half a teaspoon, day three, 1 teaspoon. Great. The thing to remember is once you have introduced a common allergen into the diet successfully, the way to maintain that tolerance is to continue regular exposure. You cannot just introduce it once and be like, oh, I'm glad that's over. I'm never doing that again. That was very nerving, right? Let's just move on to applesauce, right? We have to keep allergens in the diet regularly throughout the toddler years in order to maintain tolerance. But that strategy can be used for all different allergens.
Amazing. Thank you for that. That was really helpful. Another hot topic that's coming through, and I'm trying to go through a bunch of these because we're getting such good questions, is choking. I think, Dr. Fischman, do you want to take it? Like, how worried should we be about choking? For me, I heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, we're gonna like myth bust anyway, so like tell me if I'm wrong, but if you hear noises, they're just like gagging and putting, like I've noticed my daughter is really good at like getting it out, and she looks like she's choking, but I hear her
Yeah.
fully push.
Noise is good.
Noise is
That's
good. It's when
noise is
like
good. And I would
turning
say
it
gagging is like the opposite of choking. It's actually
correct.
like
You want them to,
protective.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
actually good that they're gagging. And I would say babies are better at gagging than older kids even. So like I think the window is like 6 to 8 months. They're actually really good at gagging and not choking at that age. And that's like
Yeah.
really why it's also an ideal time to be introducing them to foods. And so the gag is protective and choking is silent. And the other thing is it's not actually that common, right? It's common to gag, it's not common to choke. So yes, there are certain foods that are like notorious for being choking hazards and we want to avoid those, but really it's not as common as like I think it's conceived. And of course it's scary. And I do recommend parents are, you know, trained to learn how to handle a choking situation and know how to do the Heimlich and know how to like do the back blows and know what to do in the case of an emergency. But you know, the safest time to feed your kid probably is in that baby stage where they're sitting down. They're like, you're watching them intently. They're not running around like a toddler with, you know, something that is a potential choking hazard. They also don't really have the ability to pick up anything really tiny with their hands because their pincer grasp is not mature. So there's like all these other reasons that, you know, babies are not really likely to choke, right? They're likely to gag. They're going to gag. They're
Which is
definitely
good.
gonna gag.
Yeah. I like stop being scared of it because it's actually like, good girl. Like, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
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 Amazing. Another hot topic we've gotten are spices. And I'm pretty sure all spices are great, but Dr. Bajowala or Kary, do you want to jump in? Like, can we add salt, pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, all the things to our foods to make them
Mhm.
I think so.
I'm happy to weigh in on that. And
Yeah.
yes, the short answer is yes, absolutely. You can add all of those spices. I know that there is a lot of concern specifically about salt. That's a question we get
Right.
most frequently, especially with baby-led weaning, because you're
Yeah.
thinking about sharing your foods with babies. The reality is that babies can tolerate a certain amount of salt, and that the likelihood of you oversalting your foods to the extent that it could harm a baby is extremely, extremely rare, because babies will self-limit, and babies don't even have the capacity to take in large amounts of food at any one time because they're still just learning how to move food around and how to chew. So it's extremely unlikely to get into some kind of situation where you're oversalting food for baby. That being said, you're helping to build baby's flavor palette at this point. So do we need to salt foods heavily? Absolutely not. Do babies tolerate lots of foods and flavors unsalted or with a very minimal amount of salt where we might like them more salted? Absolutely. And it's a great time for them to get used to flavors that we might think are a little outrageous for a baby to enjoy. Things like raw onion even, or just fruits and vegetables that otherwise we might be cooking and changing the flavor by adding sauces or by augmenting in some way. A lot of times baby doesn't need that. So if you're cooking for the family, you can always pull out a portion that's slightly less salted or sugared or seasoned for baby. But the reality is baby can have it just like you have it, and it's perfectly fine to serve it the way you are eating it if that seems easier for you. There's just no need to add extra salt for baby. And then when it comes to spicy foods, we recommend that for infants, we start low and slow. It's actually perfectly fine for infants to have spicy foods and foods with more hot spices in them. But we recommend, again, small amounts, start low, let baby take control and do the exploring. And then we often pair those foods with something that is more soothing or cooling, like a hot or spicy food might be paired with yogurt or a fruit, or you might have a little bit of water at the table for them to explore along with those spicy foods.
Yeah.
Cool. Amazing.
One comment I would say about introducing some spices, particularly cinnamon with food, which is a very popular one, is that cinnamon, acidic foods, like tomato, pineapple, kiwi, things like that, citrus, are frequently, and even berries, are frequently associated with perioral rashes, like a little bit of transient little red dots around the mouth while baby is eating. And especially with baby-led weaning, when it's like this, right? There's a lot of food on the face, and that contact can be prolonged throughout the meal. And you might see transient rashes around the mouth. This does not mean that your baby is allergic to this food. Contact rashes are very, very common, and they usually will go away on their own. One thing I like to suggest is if your baby has sensitive skin and is prone to these types of rashes, in order to avoid confusion when these rashes occur, just take a barrier ointment, like kind of pure white petroleum jelly or or a plant-based kind of oil wax balm or ointment and apply it to the face as a barrier ointment before meals. So you can help prevent that irritation and contact rash and avoid any confusion.
Amazing. There are a few other allergen questions. One question that came through is like the impact of reflux still at 6 months. No known allergies or causes. I think that's like meaning with food. I had a reflux baby and actually food helped the reflux. So I was like, that would kind of push me to like introduce foods quicker to my daughter just because she was like spitting up a lot. And I thought like solid might ground her stomach and it worked. So I don't know if there's any science or backing to that, but it worked for me anecdotally.
From the allergy/reflux perspective, most reflux is not triggered by allergies, although there tends to be a feeling of saying the first thing I must do is change my diet or change baby's diet.
Or
Usually
formula,
that's
or
not the reason for reflux. But in some cases, if a baby has prolonged reflux and it's not getting better, and that is also associated with difficulty with weight gain or very loose, malodorous, mucousy stools, or you might see some blood in the stool, then we might certainly want to consider the diagnosis of a milk or soy protein intolerance, milk protein allergy, or other sort of delayed food hypersensitivity. And in that case, talk to your pediatrician, and if needed, a pediatric gastroenterologist or a pediatric allergist to help you.
Amazing.
I can also weigh in on that just from working with many babies who have reflux. Just keeping in the mind that when your baby starts solids, they're going to be more gaggy than the average baby almost always. So they're the babies that are prone to vomiting at the table, to spitting up at the table when they're exploring solids, especially if they're following a baby-led weaning approach. So they might be a baby who does a little bit better with some purees at first rather than going right into baby-led weaning. There are also babies who can sometimes have a little bit of a mismatch between joy and comfort with food and eating and the food itself. So they're babies that kind of need to learn to make that connection because they're so used to eating and their belly's hurting, or eating and vomiting. So going really slow, letting them take the lead and letting them build that joy slowly at the table through the community and through the experience can be super helpful with sort of recombining that experience of like comfort and joy with the eating. We also strongly recommend using resistive food teethers, which you can find in our app or on our website a little bit more about that, which are just foods that don't break apart easily in the mouth, which are excellent for babies who are super gaggy or prone to vomiting at the table for starting out, rather than jumping into foods where they're going to mash them and they'll spread around the mouth. These are foods like, say, a spare rib or a pineapple core or a mango pit that you can gnaw on, but they're not going to break. So baby actually gets a really nice amount of input to the jaw. They get flavors, but they don't have pieces that spread that make them gag and potentially vomit. So just all things to consider. There's no research to say that your baby is going to struggle more with reflux. There's actually no solid research to say the reflux will improve if you start solids, although anecdotally some people do find that. But just some things to keep in mind for babies that have reflux.
Amazing. Okay, Dr. Fischman, your take on, do we care about the nutrient breakdown of a baby's diet? Like protein, carbs, fiber, all of that. I mean, I always heard like, don't give just fruit at the beginning because it'll be like sweet and then your baby's gonna like not like bitter. And so I hear it's more about like the types of food than it is about like
I think it's like you want to give them a
nutrient.
variety of foods, right?
Yeah.
Like, and again, like I don't know, and maybe you guys can tell me. I don't think there's any evidence to say like, again, we don't have one favorite first food, like the best first food. Like it doesn't matter if you start with a vegetable versus a fruit. Like I don't think that there is any evidence to support one versus the other. I think the idea is you give them, you know, a good variety early and often, and diverse whole foods, right? Like, so obviously processed foods we'd like to avoid, things with too much sugar we want to avoid, things with too much salt we want to avoid. But I think, you know, just a good balance of vegetables, fruits, and proteins are really, and grains, like is a really healthy way to look at it, and try not to obsess over the amounts or the exact nutrient content of everything that you're giving.
People are obsessed with protein right now. We're gonna have a lot of babies eating a lot of protein.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like
you don't want to do
protein's
too much of that either. So
I know. It's all about the balance.
Yeah. exactly.
I'm gonna do like a quick allergen, like quick fire, doctor, because I have a few. Do you recommend like doing allergens outside the ER, like versus like, I guess just to be safe? I think parents are really scared about that first allergen. And so like, I guess like on the flip side, if you have a reaction, like what should you have prepared? Because I can't imagine going and sitting outside the hospital is the best course of action for introducing in every allergen, but I will let you take that.
I agree with you. I don't think
Okay.
having a meal in the car is the most enjoyable way. And I
Fair
also
enough.
don't think it's a very comforting environment for a baby in which to eat always. So I do not recommend to my patients to introduce allergens in the waiting room of the emergency department. The thing we have to remember is the vast majority of babies will never experience an allergic reaction to any food ever, ever. It's a very minority of babies who are going to develop food allergies. And so the best thing you can do is create a comfortable environment at home and arm yourself with the knowledge of how to recognize the signs and symptoms of an allergic reaction. So if they do occur, you're not panicking. That you say, oh, this looks like it might be the beginnings of an allergic reaction. Okay, we're going to move this food to the side, watch baby. See, is it going away by itself? Is it mild? Is it just a mild rash on one area? Let's wash the baby's face, see if it goes away. If there's more to it, let's get on the phone with the pediatrician and see what they have to say. It's good to have a long-acting, non-sedating antihistamine like a Zyrtec, or also known as cetirizine or Xyzal, levocetirizine in the home setting. So you can have something available in the event that your child has a rash that isn't going away very quickly and your pediatrician advises an antihistamine, but you don't need to have epinephrine on hand if your child never been with an allergy. And you certainly don't need in a medical setting unless you've been advised to do so.
Okay, great. Great advice. Should you test on skin before you ingest the food, or is that unnecessary?
Not necessary, and it actually might give you a false sense that your child is allergic to a food, even if they're not. Many children, as I was mentioning earlier about those contact rashes, there's many foods that a child will ingest perfectly well and have no symptoms at all. But if you put it on their skin, they get a little red. You don't necessarily want to do like a skin test at home first before you introduce the food.
Totally. Can you give two allergens at the same time if you've already introduced them? So can you do like, you're not going to do peanut butter and eggs, but can you give peanut butter and eggs if you've already tested peanut butter and eggs?
You could totally do peanut butter and eggs together if it's, maybe you're
Delicious
doing
too.
a little smear of peanut butter on a piece of toast and an omelet strip for breakfast. Absolutely. You can absolutely do that. You can get multiple allergens in at the same time once each common allergen has been introduced. And it's actually beneficial to do that because it's going to make regular exposure so much easier and practical for you in the long run if you don't have to do them separately.
That was 3 allergens, Dr. Bajwala. I
Oh,
love that.
I could throw yogurt in the mix
From the
and make it
toast,
more.
yeah. You got your peanut butter,
Amazing.
your egg. You could throw a little yogurt in for breakfast. You've got 4.
Love. Dr. Fischman, we've done, sorry, is someone talking? Okay, I think it was an accident. I know we spoke about water. How early should we worry about like straw sipping? I actually thought like I forgot, like I didn't do it, and then like my daughter was a little bit late to it, but she figured it out and was worried about
This
it.
would be a better question for Kary. I don't really care. I mean,
You don't care.
Like, I'm just like introduce water in some version of a cup, right? Like, there's so many cup varieties now.
Yeah.
And there's different mechanisms to get the water out from each different one, so you can experiment. I don't know, Kary, what would you say to that with the straw?
Yeah, no. So when I first started doing this 20 years ago, we called straw drinking a 24-month skill. But what we realized is if you introduce it earlier, they get it earlier. So now I would call it a 6-month skill. If you introduce it at 6 months, it's an 8-month skill if you introduce it around 8 months. When you have a strong sucking pattern present, so 6 to 8 months, you have such a strong sucking reflex that still, even though the reflex is starting to fade out, it's been so well practiced that often babies get straws like that because they are primed to suck on what you give them. Whereas once you introduce it a little bit later, it can be a little bit slower for them to get it. But as you experience, Nikki, they will get it with a little bit of
I like
practice.
freaked out, and then like 4 weeks later, like she's sucking out of a straw, and I was like, oh, I just like paid attention to it. So it's like
Exactly.
literally how it happens. So that like fully makes sense. I want to go through, I want everyone to kind of talk through a myth that they like, given we touch on a lot of things, but maybe something we haven't touched on. What is like a myth you've heard around intro to salads, allergens that you want to like debunk or just like talk to that we haven't discussed? And then I will kind of see where we're at in terms of additional questions, or maybe I'll call on a few people to ask them. But anyone want to
I
start
think we
with
kind of
milk?
like covered a few of them with
I
like the
know. We
spices
covered a lot.
and flavor to foods. I feel like I get that question all the time. Like
Do
when
you?
I
Okay.
give my baby,
Yeah.
like, is it okay if there's salt in the food? And it's like, I don't really think I would want a food without that, like I
Right.
think about like what you're eating, right? So I think teeth to eat is a big question that comes up for me. It's like, well, they don't have teeth. How can I actually give them, the baby-led weaning approach, is
Right.
sort of criticized because kids don't have a teeth, and oftentimes they don't have teeth until after a year. So like we're not delaying that long. That's not a good thing to do. And so like your baby can chew with their gums very, very, very well. And they're not going to, and even the first teeth are usually your the two middle teeth, and those are not the ones you're actually chewing the food up with. That's what you're taking a bite with. So
gums are
those
so hard.
molars don't come in until 2-ish, right? Or before, a little bit before. And so like the idea that you need to have teeth to chew is just not true at all.
Their gums are like almost as hard as the teeth. Like I would like, if you feel it, like they're hard. Kary, Dr. Bajowala, anything on your end in terms of myths you want to debunk?
Yeah, there are a lot. I think this is not exactly a myth to debunk, but just like a misunderstanding, I think that I often hear when people talk about starting solids. Your baby is learning an entirely new skill set. And when it comes to food, they are exploring it at first, not because they are hungry and they want to eat it. They're exploring it like they explore toys. It's something that has come into their environment. You've shown attention to it. They now are paying attention to it, and they are driven to touch it with their hands and to put it in their mouth. That's how they explore their environment. As they do that, that triggers chewing reflexes, that triggers their mouth to move that food and to eventually figure out how to swallow that food. And as they do that, eventually they figure out that it fills their belly and it can feel good, just like a milk feed can fill their belly and feel good. That takes time. So when we talk about a meal with a baby at 6 months old, it's not a meal.
Not a meal.
Well, it's not a meal at all. You're just exposing them to a few foods, and they're playing with those foods. They're exploring them in their mouth. They're spitting them back out. They're gagging them back out. They may be swallowing them a little bit, but again, they don't even understand at first that that is success. It's just something that happens because their body has a reflex that makes them do that. So it should take them several months to even figure out that the food is food. It can fill their belly, and that they have control over moving it back and swallowing it. And all that is perfectly fine. So when I hear families say, well, they're not even doing anything, or my baby's not eating, or they're not eating enough, the reality is that they're learning this brand new complex set of skills. They don't need to eat enough for any specific amount at first. They need to learn the skills, and they thankfully have the safety net of breast feeds and bottle feeds to fill in the gap as they build those new chewing skills at the table. So it really is about exploration of tastes and textures and foods and being part of the family meal. So it's a wonderful time to let go of some of that anxiety about whether or not they're getting enough or they're doing it just right, and really embrace the fun of teaching them how nice it feels to be at the table and giving them the space and the time to build those skills.
Drives my husband crazy though, because he's an eat freak. Like I let them like get messy and crazy, but if you have a spouse or a partner that like gets crazy around the cleanup, that becomes a fun dynamic. But yeah, I love the spaghetti in the hair and like all over. It's the best. There's nothing better.
Totally.
Dr. Bajowala, anything new? And then everyone just hold off on asking your question. Can you actually type question if you have one, and I will call on you and you can ask it out loud, and we'll kind of give room for hopefully like 4 or 5 of those. So just type question, because I'm not able to kind of keep track of like what I've answered and what I've not. So I will call on you if you type question in the chat starting now. But Dr. Bajowala, any myths, debunking things you want to talk about in terms of allergens?
I could talk for a whole hour.
I'm
about
sure. Let's do like
but I'm
one.
going to pick one. And
Great.
the one I think is the most important to address is the myth that if you or another one of your children already has a food allergy, this means you cannot introduce that food to your baby until they go see the allergist and get allergy tested. In fact, what we know about the risk factors of the development of food allergy in infants is that family history plays only a minor role in the increasing of risk in the development of food allergy. The most important factors are actually the development of eczema and the development of an allergic reaction to any other food. So if a child has severe eczema or an allergic reaction to a food already, they are at higher risk of the development of additional food allergies, and you may want to talk to your allergist before you introduce more allergens. However, if your child does not have those risk factors, but they do have a sibling with an allergy, or you as a parent have an allergy, that is not a reason to delay the introduction of that food allergen to your child. In fact, it might very well be a very good reason to accelerate the introduction of that food allergen to your child, because we want to get the allergen exposed to the immune system through the gut before baby has a chance to develop sensitization. Oops.
Sorry, I
Nikki,
do
you're
see,
muted.
yeah, I was on mute. I do see people typing in questions, but so I'll go through these, but Ashley, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, so just relating to, I'm doing baby-led weaning, and
Great.
how do I know that she is ingesting the allergen? Because it doesn't seem like she's swallowing. Like, even if she puts it to her mouth, it kind of seems like she just kind of spits it out.
That's okay. It doesn't matter. We have what's called dendritic cells or antigen presenting cells in our oral mucosa, under our tongue, inside our cheeks. So the food allergen doesn't always have to make it all the way through the gastrointestinal tract in large quantities in order to start exposing the immune system. So if all baby's going to do is suck on it a little bit and then spit it out, I still think that accomplishes something. The most important thing is that you keep doing it regularly.
Amazing. Awesome. Usha, I'm sorry if Usha,
No,
what's your question?
perfectly said. Perfectly said. Thank you. My question is, I'm already doing like baby-led weaning from 2.5 weeks, and I don't know how aggressive I can be because my baby likes to eat. She's like having good amount of food in her, and she's chewing. So I want to try like at least 400 varieties by the time she turns 1. uh, I don't know when I can repeat the foods if I keep trying like new foods.
Whenever you want, right? I don't know. I mean, there's no like perfect science to this, like we said. Like, I don't, just keep giving everything that she likes, and you want to keep giving them, right? I don't know that you have to, I don't know. I guess if it's foods that you guys have in your diet as a family, I would say keep doing those. Like, what are you going to realistically eat on a regular basis? Like, that sounds like, I don't know, counting that many foods. I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work. So I guess I would say like keep doing the best you can, but keep it realistic for your family and what you guys like to eat and what you think you might want to eat together as a family.
Yeah, I love that advice to be practical with it. The more you realize that when you build a meal, there are so many foods combined in a meal, it starts to become a lot easier. When we think about individual foods and introducing baby to a food at one time and trying to get in multiple foods that way over time, it's quite challenging. But if you serve lasagna, for example, that can include 8 different ingredients or more in one meal, it becomes a lot easier to start to repeat foods, to start to introduce bigger flavors, more foods at once. But even within that, it's really important to keep foods and flavors that you love, especially big ones, in the baby's rotation. So even more like, yes, we want variety. Yes, we want to get to lots of different flavors and lots of different textures, but that shouldn't be at the expense of continuing in the allergens and continuing in flavors that you really love. So rather than stretching for foods that you would never eat yourself and that you probably are never going to serve again, it's actually better to continue with those foods and flavors that you love over and over again.
This
Just
is
mixing and matching.
great. Okay, thank you so much. I was
Right.
I was thinking only to like hit the varieties, but I was not thinking on how to do it like repeatedly. So this helps a lot. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, we can do a couple more. Alicia, do you want to ask your question?
Hey, thanks. Yeah. So as a newborn, we noticed blood in the stool of my baby, and and the doctor did say it was probably a dairy allergy. So I stopped eating myself dairy. And then slowly she stopped getting blood in her stool, and I started to reintroduce it in my own diet. We started feeding her again the allergens, and after a few tries, she obviously, while doing baby-led feeding, she was getting it all over her skin, and it was getting quite a like hives, redness wherever she would touch. So I'm trying to like feed her myself so it doesn't get everywhere. She's not getting anaphylactic or anything. We went to the allergist. She had a very low um reaction to it. Like he was saying a 3 to 4 millimeter hive. So I guess my question is, if I keep breastfeeding, am I still introducing those dairies like through my own breast milk? And like, I guess, do I just keep spoon feeding her those allergens so she's not reacting on her skin? And like, is that helpful at all?
Yeah, so that's a big question. And so
Yeah.
I can speak in generalities. I cannot speak specifically to your child, but what I will say in general is if your child is tolerating a particular food allergen in their diet without experiencing any reaction, whether it's directly into their own diet or via breast milk, there's no reason to remove it from the diet or eliminate it. Keep it going. Even if
Okay.
child tests positive, if, you know, most children who are allergic to milk, for example, will tolerate baked milk and extensively heated milk. And
Mhm.
that may help, eating that regularly may actually help accelerate the resolution of their milk allergy. So that is a
Okay.
conversation I would have with your allergist to see how they feel about the introduction of extensively heated forms of dairy to see if that might help your baby along.
Okay, yeah, because he did say like keep exposing her to those two allergens because it was a low risk. But I guess that, yeah, that helps, and I'll keep doing it in those different types of ways, and I'll contact them. Awesome, thank you.
Last question, Brielle.
Hi. I was wondering, it's an allergy question also. I have a 10-month-old who we just found out has a peanut allergy from the allergist. I actually did do the skin test originally. Someone had told me to do that and she broke out in hives. So then we brought her to the allergist. He did the skin test and it showed a peanut allergy. So with that, I was just wondering 3 things. 1, can she grow out of it? 2, how do you find out how severe the allergy is? And 3, do you recommend desensitization with them? Like, how old can they start that? Can they do it right away at 10 months, or do they have to be a certain age?
Okay. So I gotta remember
Yeah.
okay.
So can they grow out of a peanut allergy?
Yes, but
Okay.
if a child truly has a peanut allergy, the
Mhm.
likelihood of spontaneously outgrowing that allergy is only around 20 to 30%.
Okay.
Most infants who do develop true IgE mediated peanut allergy will have that allergy for life.
Okay. And how do you know how severe it is? Like if it's like a very severe, like I don't know how you would know if it's anaphylactic or not.
So the only way to know definitively what your child's reaction to a food is going to be is to feed it to them. However, in the context of not wanting to do that because we believe a child might be allergic to a food, there are a few tests that can be done to give us an idea of if that child is at increased risk for what we call a systemic allergic reaction or anaphylaxis. And there's a blood test that can be done called component resolved diagnostics. And there are certain proteins within the peanut that are more likely to be associated with an increased risk of severe allergic reactions than others. And that is something your allergist can perform for you and see if your child is sensitized to those particular proteins. If they are, and the likelihood is that they will continue to have this peanut allergy throughout their life, there's absolutely the option of pursuing food allergen desensitization or immunotherapy with an allergist who is experienced in that treatment. And the data we have right now suggests that it works exceptionally well in very young children. And so babies are excellent candidates for this treatment.
Okay, so if you were to get the blood test and it were to show, that it was a high risk peanut allergy, then you could basically start that therapy right away.
Depending if there's no contraindications. So
Oh.
that would be a discussion with your allergist.
Okay, thank you so much.
Awesome. So we're at times, 3 people have this question, and it is on allergens again. So we're gonna end with Dr. Bajowala, but quick. Is there science back that introducing an allergen at 4 months is better than 6 months? It's like the earlier to avoid having one, I'm assuming?
It depends on the child.
Right.
So for a child who may be at increased risk for the development of a food allergy, particularly peanut, but we're extrapolating this to other food allergens as well. So say that child has severe eczema or another allergy already, then yes, there absolutely can be benefit from introducing at 4 months, which is earlier than kind of the usual time that we introduce allergens. However, as Dr. Fischman and Kary alluded to earlier, although a 4-month-old may begin exhibiting the signs of readiness for solids, they may not be ready for baby-led weaning yet at that time. And so if you are introducing allergens as early as 4 months, you may need to do it with a small amount of the allergen on the tip of a clean finger or silicone spoon. And it's not necessarily going to be baby self-feeding those allergens. As they get older and can start self-feeding, then we can transition into that. But yes, there is evidence that earlier can be better in some scenarios.
I'm going to just add on to what Dr. B said, that we have a section in our book that talks about how you would do that safely with a 4-month-old who's not really showing classic developmental readiness signs for baby-led weaning or for starting solids, but that allows them to start to explore and try to eat some of those allergens, those common allergens, in a small amount. So our book, which came out April 1st, talks about that.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I know we will share resources, where to find Sollis Health, where to find Solid Starts as support, because they are doing just that, supporting moms and parents during really hard times. And hopefully this conversation made it a little easier, or maybe made you feel a little bit more comfortable to kind of start it. I know we had some comments that like they were just scared. I was the same way. And I think you're not going to mess it up. You're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So thank you, everyone. This conversation was amazing, and we will be more in touch. And thank you to Auggie for hosting us.